I recently discovered your YouTube channel and I've been binging your videos, but I'm also really broke right now. So instead of sending a super chat or becoming a channel member, I figured that I'd show my appreciation by sending a story that you can actually use. So this happened in Vermont in the late 90s sometime, 98 or 99 I think. And it's a true story, so you can go research it to confirm I'm not making up a bunch of bull. Now having said that, please forgive me for any inaccuracies. It's been a long time since I talked about this with anyone. If I get dates or little details wrong, that's totally on me, but I can promise you, what you're about to read is true, as true can get. So back when I was in high school, there was this kid in my homeroom class named Chris, who was always into some kind of hustle. For example, there was a time he must have made literally hundreds of dollars selling counterfeit cassette tapes. I personally bought the Weezer album Pinkerton from him, and he only got in trouble when a teacher was caught buying one of his tapes. The teacher got fired, whereas Chris only got a detention, and then he was back and selling loose cigarettes in no time. This really did get him in trouble, though. Showing a little misdirected entrepreneurial spirit is one thing, but profiting from getting freshman kids hooked on smoking was something else in my mind. He ended up getting suspended for a while, but I think that his mom pleaded his case to the principal because he managed to avoid outright expulsion. When he returned from the suspension, Chris was a changed man and appeared to have completely cleared up his act. But as the saying goes, appearances can be deceptive. Instead of running hustles that could easily be traced back to him, Chris found a way to elevate his game, and it all centered around the school's computer lab, along with its brand new internet access. So, Chris might have been a grifter, but it turned out that he wasn't nearly as dumb as we all thought. All he needed was the right tools. Chris spent more and more time in the computer lab, all under the guise of cleaning up his act. The teachers figured that he'd found his calling or whatever and just sort of left him to it. We all heard that he was building a website or something, or at least learning how to. I remember thinking that was pretty cool, but Chris was always super cagey about talking about it. For some reason, Chris was also super into CB radios too. I remember him having an actual picture of one in his locker. He was very proud of the fact that he was building one, piece by piece, in his mom's garage. And not just any old CB radio either, the most powerful civilian model in the entirety of the United States. When people asked why he'd want something so nerdy, he said that he wanted to have the range to be able to prank any CB user in the country. He pretended to be little kids in trouble or whatever and then laugh his butt off when they started freaking out and panicking. I don't know if we ever really believed him on that. It was kind of funny, I guess, but also way too elaborate when you could just use payphones for prank calls. But little did we know, Chris was telling the truth, and he'd come up with a very illegal way of doing it. Basically, Chris would visit these internet chat forums set up for CB radio enthusiasts, and he'd pose as a legitimate CB radio trader. I heard that he played it pretty smart too, renting a P.O. box so the hustle wasn't connected to his parents' place, and doing all of his communication by email so no one heard it was just some kid instead of a grown man. He'd reached out to someone looking to sell a part that he needed, claiming to be this fake trader, but instead of just offering cash for the item on sale, Chris would offer them any replacement part, claiming that he could source just about anything. Most guys just told him to screw off, but every so often, someone agreed to straight up swap and was dumb enough to mail him whatever part he needed. After that, Chris just stopped answering their emails and moved on to his next target. Kinda smart if you think about it, if only in a fiendish kind of way. But much like a lot of endeavors like that, it was only a matter of time before someone figured out a way to get back at him. And boy, did they ever get back at him. One day, Chris goes to pick up a package from his P.O. box and finds that there's not one but two boxes inside. He's working multiple targets at one time by this point, so it wasn't a nice but not entirely unexpected surprise. He grabs both boxes, throws them in the back seat of his mom's car, and then drives back home to open them. His mom's in the house at the time, and she's in the same room when Chris started opening up the boxes. He opens one up, and there's radio parts inside. But when he opens up the other, there's another smaller box inside, and when he opens that smaller box, boom. Chris's mom watched her own son turn into mincemeat right there in front of her, and the explosion put her in the hospital for days afterwards. One of Chris's targets hadn't just been content to eat his loss and had come up with a horrifyingly poetic way of getting back at him. I guess the guy could have just called the cops and given them the P.O. box number because, although this was back during the Wild West days of the internet, I'm pretty sure what he was doing was still wire fraud in some way. But it turns out, this dude couldn't wait to see Chris in cuffs, so he decided on a little vigilante justice instead. This guy spent months learning how to build a small but powerful explosive device, testing out trigger mechanisms and power yields or whatever, until we finally had one that would ship, explode, and kill the first person who opened it. I think the guy was from Iowa or Idaho or something, somewhere way across the country, and I know he ended up going to prison for it because it was all over the newspapers here in Fairhaven. I guess the whole thing had really affected the way I look at the internet as I became an adult. Not only are there tons of people online who just aren't who they say they are, but there are also something legitimately scary about the internet's power to connect people. Sure, it has this amazing power to connect people in a positive way, people who never would have ended up connecting otherwise, but it also opens us up to all kinds of negative interactions too. There are a whole lot of psychos out there in cyberspace, and if you make them mad, it can have deadly, real-life consequences. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.